Oh, we're live. Good evening, everyone. Mhm. Hmm. The audio stream's not working. Well, that's not good. Give me a second here, sorry. Hmm. Okay, now we should be live. So, good evening, everyone. Broadcasting live from Hamilton on October 18th. With me is Robin, who is somewhere in the northeast of the US.
I'm in Connecticut.
Thanks. So, we have another Dhammapada. Get right into that. Test. Good evening and welcome back to our study of the Dhammapada. Try that again. Good evening and welcome back to our study of the Dhammapada. Tonight we continue on with verse number 92, which reads as follows. Ye sang sanichayo nati, ye parinyata bhojana, sunyato animito ja vimoko ye sangocharo. Akase wa sakuntanang katite sang duranaya, which means, for whom there is no storing, no hoarding, for whom there is no hoarding. Ye parinyata bhojanang, one who is fully aware or fully mindful, has perfect understanding in regards to food. Sunyato amito animito cha vimoko ye sangocharo. Empty and signless is the liberation. No, the empty and the signless liberations are their pasture, are their habitat, are their dwelling place. Pasture is really the meaning. akase wa sakuntanang, just as for birds in the sky, gatite sang duranaya, their going, their destination is hard to know. As in regards to food, the point here is those people who don't hoard and are conscientious in regards to food, fully conscientious, parinyata. Parinyata means to know thoroughly. And you'd think, well, knowing food thoroughly, it's not all that, doesn't sound all that impressive until you really consider how important food is, what a role it plays in our lives. It's really the one thing that, along with water and air, I guess, but food is like the one thing that we really have to look for and work for. And water, theoretically, is pretty easy to find. Air is still quite easy to find. But food is something you actually have to work at. So it is really the one thing that we should be, that we have to be concerned with. It's about the most primal or basic requisite. And so it stands to reason that it's the one that is closest to our heart and most closely associated with things like craving and aversion. Our likes and dislikes of food are, well, they're a bit of an issue. We obsess about food. It's the one thing that we have to think about, usually at least three times a day, usually more. We'll have the 3 meals a day that we are thinking about. And then on top of that, there are snacks and there's treats then and then there is the cooking and the preparing and the purchasing and the storing, thinking about the food what's in our refrigerator, what's in our freezer, what's in the oven, what foods we like and dislike, thinking about nutrition. It's really a huge subject, right? Now we have all sorts of information about food, and if you look in the news, it is one of the topics that it comes up quite often. This food is found to be bad for you, that food is found to be good for you. This whole gluten-free thing that some people say is just a big sort of nocebo, or yeah, it doesn't really hurt most people, and then other people say it does, and no, it's a big deal. Food is actually a big deal, which is kind of funny because I don't think many people think of it like that. I think for the most part we think, well, food is just food. It's not a big deal. It's not something that a spiritual person should really concern themselves with. In fact, we would go the other way, I think. I think a lot of spiritual people become more obsessed with food, right? Worried because they're concerned about themselves. And somehow we equate physical health with mental health, right? In Buddhism, I don't think that's the case. I think physical health is not considered to be necessarily associated with mental health, especially in regards to food. Things like food, even sickness, like well, any kind of sickness, a cold, a flu, or a terminal illness like cancer or so on. It's, I mean, you'd have to say in that case there is with sickness there is a clearer picture, because a clearer association, because for most people, when you're sick, it disturbs your mind more than when you're healthy. But you could argue the other way and say healthy people have a disturbed mind in a different way, because they become intoxicated with their body. They become conceited about it. But with food, I think there's even less of an argument that can be made that of a clear indication or a clear direct relationship between one's nourishment and one's mental health, because overnourishment can lead to this intoxication. The Buddha said, Mandanaya. Madaya I think is the one. Madaya? Mada. It makes you intoxicated. So, and much more simpler than that, much more basic than that. Food is an obsession, right? Good food, wanting good food, being disgusted by unpleasant food, having likes and dislikes and preferences, and an obsession about health can actually be a huge hindrance for the mind. Worry and concern and distraction. So you're no longer mindful. And to some extent, we obsess about it. So knowledge about food in Buddhism isn't like that. It isn't knowledge of what is nutritious and so on. That's not what is meant here at all. I'm getting ahead of, I haven't told the story yet, so I should probably do that before I talk too much about that. But this is a verse about food. It's the second and third lines are not about food, but the core here is talking about a person who understands food. So what the story was, it's an interesting story, very short. But the preceptor, Ananda's preceptor, Bellatasisa, I think. Bellatasisa? Bellatasisa. He was, I think, an arahant. I'm pretty sure. And that's what makes this story interesting, is he was an arahant, and see, in the beginning, in the beginning times, the Buddha didn't have rules for the monks. It was just assumed that they would live properly because they were all enlightened. People would practice, listen to the Buddha's teaching, become enlightened, he'd ordain them as monks. That's kind of how it went. But eventually, problems arose and situations arose, mostly based on monks that were not enlightened. So it wasn't that they should become enlightened first and then ordain. It's just that there were no unenlightened monks in the beginning. But eventually that changed. Excuse me. And one monk being pestered by his wife he had been married before he ordained, and his wife came and pestered him to give her a child. Actually to disrobe, but then when he wouldn't disrobe, she pestered him to give her a child. And so he had sex with her, just to get rid of her, basically. And she left, and that was that. But yeah, the Buddha didn't really take kindly to that, and instated the first rule that monks shall not have sex. And it went from there. And in the end, we got lots and lots of rules. So, but this was in a time when there weren't as many rules, as the rules weren't all there yet. So we have this arahant who was living off in the forest or up on a mountain maybe, and he would go into the food for alms and get enough for himself to eat, but then he would continue on alms, or he would go put that food, or go eat that food maybe, and then go on a second alms on a different street. And he would take that food that he got, just rice basically, and he would dry it in the sun and then go and meditate. And he would enter into meditation for days. So he would be it said he was in meditation for a few days, I think. And then when he came out of, yeah, actually, I don't know. No, it doesn't say that. The Dhammapada story says it, but in the Vinaya it doesn't say it. It just says he would dry it and leave it, put it aside, and then the next day he would put it in some water and eat it. But his reasoning being, he wouldn't have to go back into the village and he'd be able to focus on his meditation. It was really out of just a desire not to get caught up in the village life and to focus on his meditation, just to stay in the forest and live in meditation. So somehow he thought this was a good idea. But it got back to the Buddha, and the Buddha actually scolded him, scolded an arahant. Vigarahati. Vigarahati, which means to abuse. It can mean, it's really scolding the Buddha gave him. But actually, that's what it says the Buddha did for everybody who broke a rule or who did something that was the instigation of a rule. This is, I think, one of the only examples of an arahant being the reason for the creating of a rule. The Buddha did, I think, mention that he understood that Bellatisa was blameless, and in fact, he never. It's not an offense because there was no offense to break, and until the Buddha instated the offense, he said before that it wasn't actually an offense. So anyone who broke it before that wasn't breaking, wasn't doing anything. Well, could still say they're doing something wrong, but it wasn't an offense. So that was the story behind it. But it says in the Dhammapada, apichatang nisaya katata. He was doing it out of a desire for fewness of wishes, or out of fewness of wishes. So he was a person who had little greed and little attachment. But it's a very dangerous precedent, because then it leads to monks hoarding. Let's have stores of food so that if I get something good today, I can also have it again tomorrow. If I get something good today and tomorrow I get something bad, well, I can eat yesterday's food today, so that we can store up sweets and salts and spices, and put salt on our food when it's not salty, and if it's too bland, we can put spices in it, and so on. If I get something sweet today, it's funny being a monk, because some days you get just so much food. Like today I went to Stony Creek and there was so much food, but you can only eat so much, and then that's it, and the next day you still have nothing, which is important. It's an important part of the training to not cling, to be content with whatever, to not have this hanging over you, this sort of this sense of the past, sense of what you're going to eat in the future, what you've stored up in the past, and thinking about what you've stored up, and concern about it, and so on. It's liberating and it's challenging, right? So it's liberating in the sense that you don't have to think about cooking or storing, protecting. You don't have to worry about food going bad or being spoiled. But it's challenging, because that's exactly it. One day you might not get what you want. Well, quite often it's not about what you want to eat. It's about what you get. So I remember there was a period of time in Chomtong where all I would get was sweets. I was just going into the market and I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong, but all I would get was, some few sweets to eat, and that was all I ate for the day. Of course, they were rice sweets, so there was a little bit of substance to them, but nothing real. Certainly nothing like vegetables, protein. So it was a matter of picking through the sweets and figuring out which ones were most nutritious. But then other days, you just get so much food. But it's a complacency thing as well, right? If you've got lots of food, then you begin to rely upon it. You take this as a refuge, and it blinds you, or it hides from you the fact that this is ever present. This is an ever present gnawing on us. When you give up this support of having constant supply of food, it forces you to let go, forces you not to cling, it forces you to be open to, well, starving, at least going without food for a day. And it's funny how you get to see how the mind works then, because there are people who actually purposefully fast for days on end, and they're fine with it. But when it's kind of forced upon you, right? I don't want to, I was looking for food today and I didn't get any. How your mind whines and complains, right? Because you feel that something's wrong. It's a sense of not getting what you want. Whereas some people are so happy to not eat. They do it for days on end. They'll fast and just drink fruit juice or something. It's a real test. It shows you your defilements. Not storing food is an awesome practice to keep. And, I've been with monks who you can see where they start to give up the training, and they've got like biscuits that they keep and bread stuffs that they keep aside for the next day to have in the morning with their coffee, which they're also storing. And so I remember in Jamtong during this time where things were, I wasn't getting quite the food that I would assume to be proper nutrition. And I was struggling with it, but, being mindful and just really working through this. And then there was a lay person living out behind the monastery, and I went to see him for something. He was one of the teachers at the time. And he invited me in for toast, whole grain toast and peanut butter and a bowl of cereal and milk. And it was just such a shock. Like, it's quite a different practice, I guess. It's a real other level to your practice, having to, not having a fridge to store milk in and that kind of thing. So definitely worth practicing. Definitely worth undertaking. That's a part. I mean, there's so many aspects of the monastic life that are, for that reason, beneficial. Anyway, so that was sort of the reasoning behind the rule. I assume that the Buddha, it's my understanding of his reasoning for instating the rule. And then he gives this verse on the importance of it, how supportive it is, actually, of freedom. So then he says, Sunyato animito cha mimoko ye sangocharo. Such a person, I mean, it's such a powerful practice. And the Buddha says this several times. He talks about mindfulness. He doesn't use the word mindfulness. He uses parinyata or matanyuta, understanding, knowing moderation in food. But here he says fully understanding food. There's something else to this that I'm also not saying. And bhojana can mean not just physical food, but it can also refer to mental food, right? So this would be sense impressions, sensual pleasures, and suffering, pain, and those things that give rise to likes and dislikes. That's a kind of a food as well. Vedana is a kind of food of feelings, of pleasant and painful feelings. Thoughts, I think, intentions are a kind of food because they create a result. They feed the future. So it's understanding that as well. But even just understanding physical gross food is important because it's one of the basic requisites. And the Buddha says this kind of understanding, but I would say if you're going to get into its relationship between Nibbana, you probably have to go a little bit deeper and say, yeah, this relates to anything, because the word food in Pali, ahara, means that which brings. Hara is to carry, ahara means to bring. So it brings about a result. Like food, physical food, brings about the body, right? Sustains the body. So it brings nourishment to the body. It nourishes. Feelings nourish, attachments, likes and dislikes. Consciousness nourishes experience. So there's 4 types of food. There's physical food, there's feelings, there's consciousness, and then there's intentions. So intentions nourish results. 4 types of food. And understanding them is considered, all 4 of them is considered a primary or a base for the understanding of reality. So when you understand all 4, if you understand the mind and you understand karma, intentions, how they work, you understand feeling, you understand the physical aspects of experience. This leads to vimokkha, which is freedom. This is talking about nibbana. Sunyato means signless. This is through seeing non-self. So it helps you let go of the idea of self. When you give up food, give up the obsession with pleasing and caring and tending for oneself. Often you're better off being from time to time malnourished because it tests you, it challenges you, it opens your mind up. It forces you to let go of this intoxication. I have a beautiful body, I have a strong body. It's funny, people always tell me I'm getting thinner. And I've been getting this for years, that, oh, you're thinner than last time. And I have people who tell me this every year, that I'm getting thinner. I just think of that because the way the body looks is interesting, how we tend to apply judgments to the body, saying it's like this, it's thin, it's fat. We're concerned about these sorts of things. And so we become obsessed with food because we're worried about our bodies. And I would say to some extent the obsession, like for example, people who are concerned with their weight and wish they were thinner, I think that kind of obsession actually makes it worse. It aggravates the situation, makes one more obsessed with food, and as a result makes it harder to eat the right food, because you repress, and then you indulge, as opposed to just understanding and saying, oh yeah, I'm only need so much food, and as far as my needs go, I really don't need to eat so much, and you just stop. When you understand food, actually food is a big distraction, right? It's actually huge suffering in our lives, and we don't realize it. So that's a big part of parinyata, understanding that it's a huge bother. If meditators will get like this, after a while they'll start to say, man, I've got to go eat again. Wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to go and eat? What a bother that is. So this kind of understanding helps us give up self, helps us see impermanence. When you don't store, that's a big one. Animitta means signless, so having no what is it called? No foreknowledge, so we're no prior knowledge, not knowing in advance, having no warning, right? Because normally when we're storing, nimitta means we have in our mind a sense. Something tells us that tomorrow we're going to have pizza because there's pizza in the freezer, so we're able to know in advance. That's what nimitta means. Animitta means not being able to know in advance. It's signless, means it comes comes unexpectedly, without warning. And so that's how this is. When you stop storing food, then you can't have any expectations. You can't say, tomorrow I want to have pizza. You can, but you'll probably suffer because you'll probably not get pizza, odds are. So it helps with seeing impermanence as well. And so such people, the Buddha says, this helps us, and along with all kinds of understanding about food, help us to dwell in this kind of freedom. Just as a bird, and then he uses this wonderful imagery of just as a bird that flies in the sky without leaving a trail, so too, it's hard to know the destination of someone. The meaning here is when they pass away. When they pass away, at the very worst, they will go to a pure abode. So they might go to heaven, or they might go to the pure abodes where anagamis go to, or they might not return at all. So much harder to know where they're headed, because it's harder to know their minds. Their minds are so deep and so profound in their self, in their possession, their calm and their quietude, that it's hard to know where they're headed. And when they die, it's hard to know where they've gone. That's the meaning there. So, useful for us? Well, useful for us to be mindful of food. Something that we don't talk about nearly enough, I think. My teacher was always going on about it. Of course, I think it had a lot to do with monks storing up and eating food at the wrong times and that kind of thing. So he was always bringing it up without really saying, hey, I know you guys are eating at the wrong times and storing up food. Without actually accusing anyone, he would just bring it up like this. But nonetheless, it is a big deal because food is primary. We don't pay enough attention to it. That's why eating meditation is very important. I mean, it's important. It should be a part of our practice. And then the idea that it helps with seeing non-self, because you can't attach to anything, because you have to stop worrying about yourself or being obsessed with getting the right nutrition, that kind of thing. And the animitta, it shows you impermanence, because you have to be flexible. And such a person, once they reach this, they become free. And when they're free, you get no sense of what kind of a person they are, because they are simple. They're just free. I mean, I guess you do get a sense that they're very deep and that there's some depth to them. Anyway, so useful to us, and that's where we're headed. We're headed in that direction, to see impermanence, to see non-self, to give up suffering, to give up the cause, to stop clinging. And the idea that in the end we don't leave a trace, I think it's useful for us, for those people always wondering, how do I know that I'm progressing? Well, the less of a trace you leave this just like the wind of the wings of a bird. That's the sort of trace that you leave. So you do affect people, but it doesn't bother them. You don't cause conflict or friction. You just buffet with your wings, something very light and undisturbing. Okay, so that's our Dhammapada verse for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in, and keep practicing. Be well. Wishing you all peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Okay. Now, what's our schedule tonight, Robin? Are
What's
we?
your schedule?
Well, I mean, do we talk to Anthony? Are we having a meeting? What's going on there?
Yes. Did you
So
want to answer a few questions first?
Sure.
Okay. Why are most people inclined to seek pleasure, excitement, instead of peaceful being?
Habit, ignorance. Because you could say that pleasure is more stable. It has a feeling of stability, or an illusion of stability. Suffering is extreme, right? Pleasure, I mean, to some extent, and this is just speculation, but it does seem that way. Pleasure is smoother, right? The feeling of it is smoother. So it's reasonable to think that there's going to eventually be some inclination in that direction. The problem is, as it turns out, it doesn't actually smooth your life out. It's more like an elastic band that you pull and pull and pull, and then it snaps.
That makes sense to me.
But peace requires a much deeper understanding. You have to have a more profound, concerted, meticulous practice. So it stands to reason, if that's true, it's less likely. You're more likely to just settle for gross.
How many hours of meditation does the average Theravada monk meditate a day? And how many hours does a dedicated monk meditate a day?
It's not so much about hours, and average is hard because there's different traditions. In our tradition, I mean, I would think 3-4 hours a day would be pretty standard. And then it depends, I mean, at Tong, no, that's maybe not a good example, but there are monks who teach and um, don't do all that much formal meditation. Like Ajahn Supan, I know he does, but he's very busy. He spends hours and hours a day teaching, and but he's an awesome meditator. So when he does go off into the forest, from what I understand, he'll do 10 hours a day, quite simple, quite easily. 1 hour walking, 1 hour sitting, 1 hour walking, 1 hour sitting, just all day, 10, 12 hours. And then we get into situations where we just do, continuous, well, taking breaks, but we'll do all day and all night meditation. So average is tough to say. I mean, what would it really mean, the average monk? Every monk is different. And again, it's not about how much you do. It's about the quality and whether you're learning or not. But we have two modes, let's say. It's very generalization, but one mode is daily ordinary practice where you're doing lots of other stuff. And the other is intensive practice where you're doing just meditation. So in one mode, it might be at least an hour in the morning, an hour at night, but hopefully, depending, hopefully at least another hour after lunch. And then if you're in intensive practice, it would be at least 8 hours a day, but it should be more up, building up to 10, 12, 14 hours a day, maybe more. So it's a bit more complicated than dedicated average. This we just finished. I don't know if you all caught that, but this guy who walked back and forth on his walking path, right in the Visuddhimagga, by the time he got back from one end of the walking path to the other, he was an arahant. So, yeah, nothing about hours. That being said, it's either way important to be mindful. As you get better at it, you can be mindful during daily life. But, it's no excuse to stop meditating.
My native tongue doesn't have a verb like tasting. Can I use the noun taste for noting instead?
There's no verb. When you experience taste, what do you
The
say?
verb tasting.
Or the ing is maybe off-putting, but like I taste, is there a word for I taste? Right, so if you have a verb taste, that's what you would use. It doesn't have to be the ing, that's just English. But there's the noun taste and then there's the verb taste. That's how we have it in English.
So the noun taste would be like the taste of something, not necessarily your experience of
Yeah.
it. Right? The
In
experience is
fact, in Thai, that's what they say. In Thai, they say it like that. So then I'm going to have to say, yeah, you could use the noun taste. Because the verb would be dai lot, which means I get a taste. But rot is just taste. So they just say taste. And then they say no. They say taste no, lot no, which means the no it's just an extra syllable.
Bhante, is there a significant advantage to using verbs versus nouns while introducing newcomers to the noting practice? Your answer would be greatly beneficial to the Croatian translation of How to Meditate, which is at 60%.
Oh. Um, Right. So noun. Well, I just said, in Thai they say taste. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's perfectly fine. Why? Because we've got the senses. So the senses, there's three parts. There is the object and the subject. The subject is a bit of a, well, let's say object, subject, and experience. And you can look at any three of them. The Buddha talked about all three of them. So the object would be light, the subject would be the eye, and the experience would be seeing. So to say to yourself, light, light, light is fine because light is real. To say to yourself, taste, taste, taste is fine. I don't know if you could so much say to yourself, eye, because it's not exactly the eye as in an eyeball. That's just a concept. So I wouldn't recommend that one too much. Or tongue, 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 because it's not the tongue that we mean. It's the tongue sensitivity, or it's not the organ, which is a concept. So that one actually I would probably shy away from. Not that anyone ever would say tongue, tongue, although you do, but then it's samatha meditation. It's a different meditation. But taste is fine. The noun is fine. And in some languages, that's all they use. Lot no means taste, 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 and it's a noun. Gwyn no, which means smell, smell, smell. But then for vision, they don't say light, light, light. They say seeing, seeing. Hin no, which means seeing. Hin no, da yin no. Those are verbs. Gwyn no, which is sometimes they'll say dai gwyn no, but it's actually just a short form. So maybe they are preferring the verb. It's just they shorten it by taking out the dai part. Lot no, dai lot no, dai lot no. Tuk no, tuk is a verb. Kit no, they're all verbs. But two of them have been shortened to make them be like nouns. I'd say go for it. The object one is fine. Subject, not so useful because it's too easy to get confused with the concept. But a taste is a real thing, I think. It's not all that important because it's more about focusing your mind objectively on the object. It's not like something magic is going to happen if you get it just right. The idea is just to keep yourself clear and aware.
I find it easy to be generous with people without expecting anything back. But the more I am generous, the more often I see this scenario unfold. Some people reciprocate begrudgingly, offering as little as possible to repay what they consider a debt while keeping what they can for themselves. My reaction is to become resentful, which I know is wrong. What can I do to prevent this resentfulness from arising in the first place?
Hmm. Well, you have to learn to give. Give means give up. But it's not about changing that attitude in yourself. It's about studying it. So when you feel like someone's like, so like when you feel resentment, then you should meditate on the resentment. Don't immediately judge and say that's bad, because if you knew it was bad, you wouldn't get resentful. Like if you really knew, so study it, examine the resentfulness, and watch it and learn about it. Eventually, you will know that it's wrong, and you just will stop being resentful. It's a good example of something that you think you know is wrong, but you don't really know is wrong. In fact, you enjoy getting resentful. You want to get, you're keen on getting resentful, keen on resenting it. And then you feel guilty about it because intellectually you know, oh, I'm a bad person and so on. And we like that as well. We're keen to chastise ourselves and hate ourselves and that kind of, we do all sorts of crazy things just out of ignorance. And it builds and builds and our habits build haphazardly. It's like building a house of cards, very poor foundation, and then it collapses. So we study that and we start building stronger foundations based on really supportive qualities of mind. Resentment isn't one of them, so you learn that. It's just a matter of learning.
Dear Bante, when I do more than 2 hours of meditation, I generally feel like I get stuck, like I lose the mindfulness and the clearness, sampajana, kind of like I become a bit zombie like. I end up noting boredom and drowsiness and fogginess for a long time, since I know that's probably your first advice. Your second advice is probably to change posture after a while. But is there anything else I could do?
I already know what my advice is going to be. No, you've made the primary mistake of a meditator. It's not mindfulness you're talking about. I have to again and again and again, I have to repeat myself again and again, which is fine, but it really has to be ingrained in your mind. What you're talking about is not mindful, because then you react to it by saying bored, or whatever it is, right? Bored was what you're saying, bored. That's mindfulness. What you're talking about is concentration. And so you feel unconcentrated, or you feel foggy, or you feel this or that. So it's completely something different. It's often very physical. So you're physical, you don't feel as good. Let's put it that way. And that's when mindfulness is most important. But you can't lose mindfulness. Mindfulness, either you are mindful now or you're not. It's present moment. There's no such thing as, oh, after the second hour, I lost my mindfulness, faded away or something. It doesn't. It can't fade away. It's momentary. It doesn't mean your mindfulness. You feel like, oh, my mindfulness is getting worse. Well, mindfulness can't be better or worse. It's now or it's not. It's binary. It's either is or it isn't. That's what we have to work. I mean, it's not entirely the case, and it's there are other ways of explaining it, but practically speaking, you have to look at it that way. Otherwise, you're not talking about mindfulness anymore. You're talking about either concentration or often something that's just physical, feeling bad, feeling stiff, feeling like a zombie. It's often just the brain, the brain. It can often be because of bad habits in meditation. If you have the bad habit cultivated again and again and constantly cultivating this, it can really hurt your mind. you know so it's about adjusting your practice as well, not just plowing through doing hours. This is why we are very careful not to push hours, because if you push hours, then you just push and push and push mindlessly. Got to get another hour, and it's useless. You need that aspect of what we call vimamsa, which means to adjust your practice, to reflect upon your practice, and to observe and to change according to the problems that you're having.
Bhante, what is your view on Freudian psychoanalysis?
I don't have one. I don't know anything about it, really.
Would you say doing experiments with living cells to produce pharmaceuticals is an unwholesome job?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, it depends. Is it an organism? Like, are we talking about small, like, what are those little tiny, like, sorry?
Amoebas? Like amoebas?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, then is an amoeba alive? I think there is a sense that it's a living being. I'm not sure. I've asked this question of monks, and generally they tend to answer that an amoeba is alive. But if you don't know it's there, um, you're excused. But if you intentionally kill an amoeba, people have said, yes, this is. So I said, well, what about boiling water, right? Your whole intention of boiling the water, in the forest anyway, is to get rid of the bacteria. It's a good way to purify the water. Well, the Jains were big on not drinking water that hadn't been boiled, which is kind of interesting because someone had to boil it, right? So requiring it to be boiled.
The next question is, are bacteria sentient?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm told that from some monks that they are. It's hard to believe, right?
So then you couldn't even use an antibacterial soap in good conscience then, right?
I don't know. No, the defense is that you don't see the bacteria, so you just have a sense that there may be bacteria there. But in order to kill, you have to have knowledge of a living being. So you'd have to look under a microscope, see the bacteria, and inject to kill that specific bacteria that you saw, that you have knowledge of. That's the defense that I was told, because that was my argument as well.
That makes sense. Hello, Bhante. I appreciate what you're doing here. When I'm meditating, sometimes I feel like I don't really know what I'm feeling or thinking. like my experience is so chaotic I can't even see it. I find myself forcing myself to note rising and falling. Are those feelings expected? Any advice?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all going to be roses. There are thorns. What you're seeing is like non-self. You're seeing impermanent suffering and non-self. You're seeing that it's not our mind that we can just control and have it be the way we want it all the time. So it um, teaches you patience. The advice I guess I would give is to be mindful of the overall condition, either as overwhelmed, and so on. But finding yourself forcing things, you have to understand it in the correct light. That's your habit. Habitually, we force things. It's not actually you doing it, it's a habit that you see or you're observing. What's more important than seeing that is seeing how much suffering that causes. So what you're not saying here, but what is implicit in it, is that there's a problem with you forcing it. It feels less comfortable. Sometimes meditators fall into this habit of forcing, thinking that that's the way they have to do it. And that over some time, they realize that, or they wonder what's wrong, and they feel like, I just can't do this meditation. I'm trying, right? But the real problem is that they're trying, they're forcing. But for the most part, you're seeing the forcing, and more importantly, you're seeing how the mind's interference with the breath is actually causing suffering, or with the experience. And simply seeing that is enough. That's what changes the mind. That's what frees the mind. Mind changes habit.
Is it bad when you hate to eat and find it a chore and have to make yourself go make food to eat?
It's bad to hate, I suppose, but you should note that. I think an arahant sees things as burdens, but they aren't upset by them. So that's the question. Seeing it as a burden is wisdom, but being upset by that, or feeling burdened, feeling the sense of onerousness, that's unwholesome. So yeah, it's something you have to deal with.
And then Glenn is asking where he can send the recording from the Visuddhimagga class today.
Well, if you can find a way to put it on the internet, that'd be great. Then I can download it.
Or doesn't the Dropbox work as well for that?
Yeah, sure. If you have a Dropbox account.
If you have Dropbox, you can send that through Dropbox. What is unwholesomeness?
Unwholesomeness is greed. Greed is unwholesome. Anger is unwholesome, and delusion is unwholesome.
And lastly, Bhante, how are teachers assigned to bhikkhus in your tradition?
And teachers aren't assigned like this. You have to go find a teacher. We don't assign them. You say, I want to go and learn from this teacher, and you go and ask them, can I be your teacher? I mean, that's how it should be. And if you decide, I don't like this teacher, I want to go to find another teacher, then you say, I don't want to take you as my teacher anymore, I'm going to find a new teacher. You go and find a new teacher. Or if your teacher says, you're a useless student, get out of here, they can say, I don't want to be your teacher anymore. Again, it's democratic, I think is the word, no? It's libertarian, maybe.
It's pretty honest, too.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just, I don't know that monks would actually say, you're useless, go away. But they could.
That's something the Buddha said, useless man?
Moga Purisa, yeah. Okay, Good night, everyone. That's all for tonight. Thanks, Robin, for helping out. Thank everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, Bhante.
Good night.
Good night.